Hey everyone, so welcome back to the channel. It's so great to see everybody again. And today's topic is something that's kind of, I would say, a little bit harsh, a little bit mean. Um, you might have a lot of feelings come up during this topic. Probably negative feelings, maybe some positive feelings by the end of this video, hopefully. But today's topic is basically stop asking to be loved. Stop asking for people to love you. And I'm going to go more in depth on this topic, obviously throughout this video. However, and I'm going to talk about like certain times when it's okay to ask to be loved, or like when you should speak up about like your needs and stuff like that. But for right now, I'm going to stay on the topic of stop asking to be loved. So, being loved is your birthright. Let's just get this out of the way first. Let's just start off on a high note, on a like what we naturally deserve, all of us as human beings, like simply like your conception and everything, like you were born from love, right? And I'm not even talking about like your parents or whatever. I'm talking about like universe loves you, or like if even if you believe you were like even if you believe in God or anything, like you were born from love. Like if you believe in a higher power, right? When that higher power was creating you, they created you out of like love, out of the process of like I want to create something amazing. And when you are in this process of creation, and you can even think back to all the stuff that you've created in your life, whether you like made a painting or you made like pottery, like there is some amount of love that goes into any type of creation, right? Any type of passion project or anything like that. So being loved inherently is your birthright. So let's just get that out of the way, right? Like being loved is your birthright. So when you go out and you're asking to be loved and you're asking for all of this, you're not resting in your birthright. You are not claiming your birthright. It's almost like when you go out and you're asking to be loved, right? It's almost like you're saying like, I was not born out of love, like please love me, like, or it's almost saying like, I can't love myself, like please love me, like someone, like you want that validation. You want someone to love you so much, which that is okay. That is okay. Like we are human beings. We were born from love. We want more love. Like that is okay. Especially if your parents didn't give you love as a child. You may grow up to believe that you're going to find love in, relationships or in friendships. And because of this, you are putting a lot of pressure on these relationships to be like your everything. Because realistically, I'm trying to say this in a nice way, but realistically, your parents, they did kind of fail you. um, Realistically, your parents just a little bit. So you go out and you go in search of someone who will like fully embrace like all of you, like your flaws, the good, the bad, the ugly, all of that, right? But you, this can cause you to be in like situations that aren't healthy for you, right? So the example I'm thinking of, right, is like being cheated on, or even like, you know how when you're traumatized as a child, you see a lot of people with trauma finding partners who are exactly like their parents because they're comfortable in that kind of like energy. They're comfortable in like they're used to the trauma, and so when they find a partner who kind of recreates the same trauma that their parents did, like you don't have to grow, you don't have to find a new role, you don't have to become a different person. It's easy because you don't have to change, right? So in that sense, like we can put ourselves in like dangerous situations, especially if your parents were very, very abusive as a child and you look for that in a partner, obviously accidentally, but like you look for that in a partner. So that can put us in dangerous situations, right? Like asking to be loved in that sense, and wanting to be loved so bad by a partner or even a friendship, because friendships can be abusive as well. that can put you in a seriously like dangerous situation, right? Asking to be loved sometimes is not, you need to stop doing that, or you need to like ask the right person to love you, stuff like that, right? So if you weren't loved as a child, if your parents were abusive, if your friends were abusive, or yes, your friends, because friends can cause you trauma as well. So if your parents were abusive, or your friends were abusive, or like some type of family member, or your teachers were abusive, or whatever, um, this this sucks. I have no other way to say it, but this literally sucks. It it completely warps your mentality, because the whole point of like conceiving children and having children, and like the whole role of like friends and teachers and parents, is to love and protect your child, right? Like children inherently should not have to ask to be loved, right? Like sometimes, a baby like will cry, and that's kind of like their signal that like mom, I need help, dad, I need help, like, or like teacher, I need help, like crying and stuff like that, or acting out or needing attention. But like, you shouldn't have to do that. There are certain people in this world who are supposed to protect you and care about you and love you immediately. Like it's just for you existing. Like you don't have to, like do like three different backflips and like do all these crazy things, or like lie and manipulate and all of that just to be loved, right? Like they should care about you just for existing. And so when you stop asking to be loved, that's where you're trying to return back to. You're trying to return back to the state of like, I was born from love and I shouldn't have to ask to be loved. I should just be loved. And that is so true. Like you should just be loved. You know what I'm saying? Like you shouldn't have to convince people to love you. You shouldn't have to manipulate people to love you. You should just simply be loved. Um, and as I was saying, like parents and teachers, like they often fail. They often fail at this because they haven't dissolved their own trauma, or they haven't like gotten rid of their own trauma or worked through their own trauma. So they can like mess you up, or like they mess you up, like you can learn to return to this like, I would say like homeostasis. I'm trying to think of a simpler word to say. Um, Return to this balance, return to this like equilibrium, of like, I was made to be loved, like I should not have to work for love. Okay, so that's something you have to remember and remind yourself, that you do not have to work to be loved. So another thing, these people can like fail you in multiple different ways. So often you hear stories about like parents being physically abusive, and not protecting your child and being the one to actually hurt your child. That's a way of making your child feel unloved. But it's also emotionally, and I feel like a lot of people don't talk about this. Emotionally, like when you are let down, when you like this, once again, the example of a baby crying. If you're like a crying baby and you're like asking for parents to love you and they just like ignore you after a breakup, you need your parents to emotionally be there for you, and they weren't, and they're just like, oh, that's the way life is, or like, you'll get through it, or like, why are you sad? I've been through worse, like, get over it. All those phrases are things you might have heard from your parents, and being emotionally rejected is kind of the same as being like physically rejected, or like being physically, like abused and stuff like that, and it can cause the same amount of damage, right? So all this stuff, all this like childhood um lived experiences, I don't want to call it trauma, um, all their childhood like lived experiences can cause you to feel like the only way you're going to be loved in this world is if you like pretend to be someone you're not, or if you pretend to be everything exactly like the person wants to, like you shapeshift into like their ideal person, or like all this type of things can make you feel like you're not lovable just by being yourself. And if you're ever in a group or situation or space that makes you feel unloved, then that's probably for any reason, then that's probably a sign that you should like get up and leave. Another way that people kind of like ask to be loved, besides like the whole shape-shifting thing, is allowing your boundaries to be crossed. So because of childhood lived experiences, you might either not have boundaries, or you have boundaries that are kind of like shaky. What's coming to mind right now is like things like pleasers. They have boundaries. Like people pleasers do have boundaries. It's just the problem is that they kind of let their boundaries go, or put other people's boundaries on top of theirs, and believe that like other people's opinions and boundaries and values are more important than their own. So when you allow other people to continuously cross your boundaries and stuff like that, and you keep forgiving them, that is a way of asking to be loved. Like by doing that, you're asking someone to love you, and you're changing yourself so that they will love you. Staying with someone if they've cheated on you, that's another way you're asking to be loved. Because you're asking, like, you're literally asking them to stay, or you're asking them to be faithful, or you're asking them to do all this stuff. And what you're doing that in that situation as well is you're putting down your own feelings and your own like experiences and stuff that's coming up, because what's probably coming up is like, am I not good enough, or stuff like that. Like why did they cheat? Like maybe I need to do more. And you have like a lot of self-blame. And so in that way, you still are asking to be loved, right? You're asking them to stay. You're asking them to stop cheating. You're asking them to like stick with you and to love you and to like stop doing those harmful cheating actions. And likely they are not going to do that. That's another thing. When you ask someone to love you, if you have to ask, like in this specific situation, if you have to ask, likely they don't love you, or they don't have the capacity to love you the way you need to be loved. And in that situation, it's okay to let them go. Okay, wow, my brain today just seems to be in and out just like that. But yeah, likely if you have to ask someone to be loved, you have to ask someone to be like heard and seen, then they don't already love you, or they could also be using you. The thing with people pleasers is sometimes people don't actually like them. Sometimes people pleasers, it's like, yeah, I don't like you, but you're useful. I'm gonna keep you around because I can use you. Or like, people pleasers are kind of like, they're very helpful. They're placeholder friends in a way. So it's like, oh, I have no one else to like go to this party with. I'm gonna call up the person who never says no, or always makes time for me, or da 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 da. Like, so now you know what it looks like to ask to be loved, and you know that you shouldn't, like, you should be loved just for existing. You shouldn't have to ask for it, right? Like, that is your human birthright. Like, that should be natural, if that makes sense, right? But I want to talk about quickly, like, certain times when it's okay to ask to be loved. Like, certain times, like, we have to ask, like, we have to speak up of like what we need, so certain times it's okay to ask to be loved is when you're in a relationship. If it's like the beginning of a relationship and stuff like that, it's okay to tell your partner how to love you, right? So that's kind of like, this is my love language, or this is what I need you to do to make me feel loved. That is okay, because it's the beginning of a relationship, and you're learning about each other, and you're learning about like different things about each other, and they're not mind readers, right? Like, they don't immediately know how to love you. I think in like very small cases and like rare instances, like people just immediately click like telepathically, and they just know what you need and what you want, and like exactly how to love you. But in most instances, they do not just naturally know how to love you. Like, you're gonna have to tell them, like, this is how I want to be treated. If you don't treat me this way, I'm out, I'm leaving, bye. But like, you need to treat me this way, or like, I need to be treated this way in order to feel loved. And if you can't love me, someone else is going to. So exactly. Another time, sometimes you have to ask. Another instance where you have to ask to be loved is sometimes your family, right? This sounds kind of shaky, but when you're a child and you're going through all these emotions, sometimes you don't have the words to speak up for yourself and to tell your family, like, what you did hurt me, or I don't really feel loved by you. I didn't feel loved as a child. Like, can we change? Can we move in a better direction? Right? And sometimes that takes until adulthood to be able to speak up and have the words, because realistically, a child does not have this vocabulary. They don't have the knowledge. They don't have the like terms they need to express themselves and just like tell you like this is hurting. Obviously, like a child can like scream and cry and throw temper tantrums, but if you have a family who doesn't really listen to these things, then you need to develop your words. And as I said, because a child doesn't have these words, they can't tell their family what's wrong. But now that you're an adult, you can tell your family what's wrong, or now that you're moved out and you're not like so reliant on them, you can tell your family like what is wrong and why it's wrong and why it was harmful and why it was hurtful. And I feel like there's a misconception sometimes that if your family traumatizes you as a child, you can never speak to them again. Um, Sometimes that is true, depending on the trauma. It's best to never speak to them again. But sometimes, if your family is, if you have parents or grandparents or siblings who want to work towards like reconnecting and healing that relationship and want to put in the work, like, they go to therapy, they're like, how can I fix this relationship? Like, how can we move forward? And how can I like be better in the future, be a better mother, be a better father, be a better sibling, right? Like, how can I move forward in the future? Then I would say like you can like voice your opinion and hopefully move towards, like reconciliation. And that is a time when it is okay to ask to be loved. Like when it's a family member and when it's like childhood trauma and when they're willing to change. So the whole thing there is like they have to put in the work to change, because if they're not going to put in the work, then once again, you're kind of like you're knocking on a door and no one's home and no one's going to answer, but you're still knocking on the door, and now it's like raining and there's snow and it's pouring and like there's wind, and like just go inside, just leave. Like it's better to just go home at that point instead of keep knocking on this door that won't open, right? Friendships, I think even if you're friends for like 7 or 8 years, like you still sometimes have to tell your friends how to treat you, or like work with your friends on like this is the way I want to be treated. And I think especially in relationships like that, like friendships where you're ever evolving, the way you wanted to be treated yesterday might change from the way you want to be treated today, right? So you kind of have to kind of continuously update them on like this is how I want to be treated, or this is how I want to be treated today versus yesterday, and stuff like that. So yeah, that's another time where it's like asking to be loved in a friendship. That kind of makes sense, right? Because your friends are supposed to love you, they're supposed to care about you, they're supposed to do all that stuff, right? Yes, the last thing I have for this entire video is the uncomfort. So when you go through childhood trauma or you go through anything like that, and you're so used to like, you realize you're not going to get love from your family, you realize you're not going to get love from your friends, so you're like chasing a partner to love you or something like that, right? Or you're like going out of your way to like convince people that you're worthy of love, or convince people to love you, like it's a job interview, like you're like, I'm lovable because I can cook, I can clean, I can, like, you're listing off reasons of why you're lovable. It's like a resume of why you're lovable, right? So I think like when you live so long in this kind of state of like, I would say maybe like fight, like out of all the stress responses, it might be like a fight response, because you're trying to combat the kind of rumors or stereotypes that you're not lovable and that you're not loved, right? So regardless, you spend so much time in this like state of like, oh my gosh, like love me, love me, love me, love me. So when you stop asking to be loved, when you like let it go, and you just like, the people who love you, and the people who don't, you're not going to convince them, you're not going to try to convince them to stay, none of that. When you're first going through that transition period of point A to point B, and we want to be at point B, which is not asking to be loved, right? It can be uncomfortable, right? Because you're changing, you're becoming something different, you're becoming something new. So it can be super duper uncomfortable. You're gonna feel like that feeling in your chest of like, that feeling whenever you stop asking to be loved, right? And someone's like, and you're letting someone walk away, or you're telling someone like, I don't want you in my life anymore, or something like that. You're gonna feel that feeling of like, maybe I should stop them, or like that feeling of like, please don't go, or like that feeling of begging inside, like begging to be loved and begging for them not to leave. You're going to want to act on that. But the whole thing about this is you have to realize like that emotion is normal. It's normal, and you can't act like you right now wants to act on it, but you in the future is going to thank you for not acting on it. So you're going to have to use like every technique, whether you go to therapy or you have other coping mechanisms. You're going to have to use every technique to tell yourself like, no, like let that person go. They don't love you. They don't care for you. Like you're putting in more effort to keep this relationship sustainable than they are. Like you are asking to be loved, and that is like, you shouldn't have to do that. And you have to recognize that like, if you want to become the person you want to be, which is the person who is just naturally loved and who is naturally, I keep saying loved a lot, but it's true. If you want to become that person who is naturally loved and who is naturally like accepted for, every part of them, you're going to have to learn to stop not letting people go. Like stop like standing in front of the door of the house while they're trying to leave. Like let them leave. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, it's just going to be very uncomfortable at first, but that uncomfort does dissipate. So like that's the good part about it, right? Like it is uncomfortable, but that discomfort will dissipate eventually. And eventually, like before you know it, you're going to wake up, and I know this is going to sound long, but you're going to wake up like 5 years from now, or even maybe like 1 month from now, or 2 weeks from now, or depending how long it takes you to like learn this lesson. But you're going to wake up like 5 months from now, and you're going to be surrounded by people who love you. And you could be surrounded by a million friends, you could be surrounded by just yourself, but at least you're surrounded by people who genuinely care for you and like care about you, and like makes you like don't die, like you're surrounded by people who genuinely want the best for you. And you're gonna look around and you're gonna be like, this is so much better than constantly like begging and pleading and like all of that. And the thing with begging and pleading is it kind of takes a blow to your self-esteem. Like you take a blow to your self-confidence, because it's like, why do I have to beg all these people to stay? Like other people don't have to beg all these people to stay. Like the person that's leaving you and going towards someone else, like that other person isn't begging that person to come towards them or begging that person to stay. They just get that person. But you, it's like you're over here like begging that friend to stay, begging that partner to stay, maybe even sometimes like begging that parent to stay, which is not healthy, right? I feel like I'm gonna leave you with one last piece of advice. Continuously take steps in the direction where you want to be in life, even if it's hard, even if it feels uncomfortable. At least you're moving to the direction where you want to be in life. And just try to stop taking directions into the direction where you don't want to be in life, right? So yeah, that's pretty much it. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you learned something from it. And yeah, I'll see you in the next video. And just know that you were always meant to be loved. Okay, bye.